Hi, I'm Jen Rogers, and this is Breakthrough Economy. Today, we're diving into a behind the scenes technology that powers everything from microwaves to self driving cars to ChatGPT. Semiconductors. We're talking with Ziad Asghar, Senior Vice President of Product Management at Qualcomm, and Ruben Roy, Applied Technology Analyst at Stifel. So, Ruben, let's start with you. It seems like before the pandemic and the global chip shortage, few people really realize what semiconductors did, much less the impact they have on our day-to-day lives. So tell us about the impact of the pandemic on the public's view of semiconductors and the industry as a whole.
It was a very interesting time. We took semiconductors, I think, for granted in a lot of the everyday appliances, automobiles, you name it. There's semiconductors in pretty much every gadget or appliance that we use these days. And I think that what happened was a lot of consumers quickly realized that there's something out there that's not available. And when you went to either a automobile dealership to buy a new car or a used car even, or you went to buy a new appliance, there was a lot of supply chain shortages, which started to come up. And the root of the problem was quickly discovered to be semiconductors.
There definitely seems to be a lot of excitement and interest around the industry right now. Historically, it's pretty cyclical. How would you describe the current semiconductor market and the cycle right now?
Parts of the semiconductor industry have been and always will be cyclical. In our view, there are areas that are emerging, though, whether they're certain types of processors, which are certain type of technology that actually are able to compute various functions, or there are other um, semiconductor technologies that are used in specific or specialty applications, which tend to be a little less cyclical. So I think it was going to be a case by case basis. There's going to be some companies that are always related to the cyclical nature of the industry. Memory comes to mind. We use memory in all of our products, whether it's our Apple iPhone or your personal computer. And then we have these CPUs that I'm talking about, which today are used in things like autonomous driving or in artificial intelligence, which comes up a lot in a lot of different end markets. And I think that in those types of markets where you were using an increasing number of semiconductors or increasing content of semiconductors in those applications, those markets could tend to become a little less cyclical as we think about at least the medium term here. Longer term, certainly a lot of these end markets will tend to, again, turn into some level of cyclicality. But we think that there's a little bit of a wave coming in various parts of the technology ecosystem, and some semiconductor companies that are positioned well are going to benefit because of that.
So how are you going to take advantage of that? Where are we going to see these jumps made? Is this simply a matter of R&D? Who's going to invest the most? How are producers going to be able to really cater to all of AI's demand right now that we are seeing?
Yeah, I think it's going to be each and every component. The AI model has to be best and pristine. It has to be the most optimized. So what we have been driving at Qualcomm for more than a decade is best-in-class hardware, best-in-class software, and tools. And essentially today, what we can do at Qualcomm is to do more AI processing than anybody else for a given amount of power. That's going to be something that really distinguishes everybody in a very, very clear fashion. It just distinguishes Qualcomm in a very clear fashion as well. Then the software, it has to be able to take any model, ingest it, and be able to run it extremely well on the device. And then finally, the tools. So some of the techniques that we have shown is how to be able to compress the models. And that allows them to run far better on device than otherwise possible. And I'll say it over here, and we have said it publicly. We can do 10 billion parameter models entirely on the device. That just changes the game entirely.
So let's talk about this little wave. And I think some people have been thinking it's been coming for some time. And can you take us back through some of the factors that you think have impacted the sector the most to give this push that we're seeing right now?
We've gotten to this point where we're dependent on just a few manufacturers, right? So that's good because we can control supply and control supply and demand based on demand. But if we have these kind of artificial stimuli into the system, we went into the pandemic and all of a sudden we pushed the brakes on manufacturing at very few facilities. And then guess what? There's a lot of demand, right? There's stimulus put into the system, consumers had money, and there's nothing to buy because there's not enough semiconductor output being manufactured out of these few factories that are out there. So that's one event I would say that really changed the industry again over the last just 10 years.
And now we have a lot of interest around semiconductors because of all the talk and the interest in AI and machine learning. So that seems to be triggering this next boom in the semiconductor space. Do you think that this lives up to the hype? And if so, what's Qualcomm doing to respond?
Yeah, I think generative AI is absolutely an unbelievable technology, but extremely promising. We think the right place to do generative AI is on the device. And basically, it solves many problems. By doing generative AI on the device, you're making sure that the private information of the user stays on the device, never leaves it. At the same time, you're able to get extremely quick response back. You're able to be able to do it even if you're not connected. And I think that has an amazing benefit. And finally, you can actually contextualize the information based on where the user is, what he's doing. And I think that brings a very different level of generative AI experience than otherwise possible.
Ruben, do you think that investors are mostly bullish or bearish on how AI will impact the semiconductor industry?
Today, I would say certainly bullish. I mean, if you look at stocks like NVIDIA, which are up almost 100% year to date, it's really up because of, let's use the word hype, a hype around AI, and there is a lot of hype. And so to your question, are investors interested? I would say certainly. I mean, on most of these earnings conference calls that we listen to, the hyperscale data centers are speaking about this massive CapEx dollars that they need to spend on their networks. But in this macro environment, which has gotten a little bit tougher, interest rates are rising, obviously, in the United States and elsewhere, and there's a lot of demand pauses, et cetera, as we come out of the stimulus related to the pandemic. And so I think there's scrutiny on where CapEx dollars are going to be spent, and all of a sudden we're spending more on AI, right? So investors are certainly tuned into that dynamic, and I think there are going to be winners and losers as we move forward through the next several years.
Do you think that the semiconductor space gets the respect that it deserves?
I think people have become more aware of it. Definitely, I think in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years. But I think people really don't fully encompass the fact that the transistor improvement, the IPs that we create essentially make all of this possible. I mean, that hardware block that we have inside our chips, the hexagon processor, for example, that does all of this AI processing is unique, and it has taken an amazing amount of R&D for us to be able to get there. But I think use cases like generative AI will bring it much more to the front. So we're very excited about that.
To wrap up, I want to know what you are most excited about. What is the wow that we're going to see in the next couple of years, or even you can go out a decade if you want, the themes and the trends that you think are really going to revolutionize what we all have?
I think AI is really an interesting topic, and it's what I'm most excited about right now. And it's not ChatGPT or watching my daughter maybe have ChatGPT write an essay for her or that type of thing, but it's the AI that's going to end up driving autonomous vehicles or autonomous robotics that are going to be helpful, I think, for humans everywhere in the globe. And I think it's going to help productivity. It's going to help a lot of issues that we have today with climate issues, hunger issues. I think AI is a real technology that can drive a lot of innovation, a lot of productivity benefits over time. And that's what I'm most excited about. I think there's going to be a lot of winners coming in the semiconductor ecosystem because of it. And we'll see 10 years from now, I watched the Jetsons when I was a kid, and I think we're getting closer to a time when we're going to have a lot of interesting things that we saw in that type of a framework.
All right, Ziad and Ruben, thank you both so much for joining us. I'm Jen Rogers.